In this lesson, we're going to talk about the amendment process for the United States Constitution. As we discuss this, keep in mind that the process to amend the Virginia Constitution is very similar, but it does have some key differences. Amending the United States Constitution. Within the Constitution of the United States, the Founding Fathers defined the process by which formal changes are made to the document. Remember, there are 7 articles in the U.S. Constitution that explain the structure of our government. These articles give instructions on how the government should operate, kind of like rules for a game. Article 5 gives the directions on how to add or change or amend the United States Constitution. As you know, our country is much different today than when our Founding Fathers wrote the Constitution. We have different kinds of jobs, values, and technology, among other things. So it's important that our government can change as our country changes. It is important to be able to change the Constitution so that our government meets the needs of American citizens over time. Process for amending the Constitution of the United States. The framers intended to make the amendment process difficult. Why? Why would they do that? Well, remember that when the Constitution was written, they had just finished fighting a war trying to get away from a totalitarian government, or King George. They wanted more freedom, and they wanted to ensure that the government they were creating couldn't change too fast. If it could change rapidly, then the government could take away individual freedoms, and they did not want that. The Constitution was meant to limit the power of the government. The first step of the amendment process requires action by Congress or National Convention. But even before that, someone has to have an idea. Usually, someone or a group of people sees a problem with the government or a problem that the government can fix. Then they start getting support by educating people, creating an interest group, and then they contact their government representative. So they contact the person who represents them in Congress or the Senate, and then that person tells the idea to Congress. So amendments can be proposed by a vote of 2/3 of the members of both houses of Congress. This means the representatives in Congress bring up the idea that somebody told them about, almost like they would when they're talking about a new law. And then all the people in Congress vote on it. But it's different than a law because laws need to pass by just a majority, just 50% of both the House of Representatives and the Senate. But for an amendment, when they vote on it, it has to pass by 2/3 in the Senate and the House of Representatives. Or amendments can be proposed by a national convention called at the request of 2/3 or 34 of the state legislatures. This method was added by the founders in case they needed to make an amendment about Congress, or maybe that Congress wouldn't like, but our country needed. So there had to be a way to amend the Constitution without it going through Congress. But so far, no amendments have been proposed that way. Ratification by the states, or 3/4 or 38 states. Ratified means approved by. They vote to show they approve that amendment and they want it to become part of the Constitution. Ratification or approval requires the approval of 3/4 of the state legislatures. So one way to do this step is that the state governments, the legislature, so the law-making branch in the state governments, vote on it, and they say, yes, we think also that this should be part of the United States Constitution. Or ratification, approval, can also be reached when 3/4 of ratifying conventions vote in favor of the amendment. And a ratifying convention is a group of people appointed by the state government. The amendments. Remember, the Constitution has 3 sections. It has the preamble, which states the goals of the government, the 7 articles, which are the structure of the government, and then the amendments, which are the changes that have been made to the Constitution. Because the amendment process is complex, there are only 27 amendments until now. We've been a country, the Constitution has been ratified for well over 200 years, and only 27 amendments have been added. In addition to the U.S. Constitution, each state has their own constitution. Virginia's Constitution can also be amended. Remember, when we talk about federalism, we live under 2 governments, and each of those has its own constitution that defines the structure of the state government. So in addition to the U.S. Constitution, each state has its own constitution. Virginia's Constitution can also be amended. It's very similar to the U.S. Constitution process, but it's a little different. It is a 2-step process, and amendments are proposed by action of Virginia's General Assembly or by convention, and it's ratified by the voters of Virginia. So the General Assembly is Virginia's legislative branch, and they're the ones that propose it after they get an idea from somebody who's seen a problem. They vote on it, and it has to be 2/3 of a vote. And then if it passes the General Assembly by a 2/3 vote, they put it on the ballot. And when people of Virginia go to vote, they vote directly on whether or not they think that amendment should be added to the Virginia Constitution. So it's ratified or approved by the voters when we go to the polls. So what is important to understand about all of this? The framers of our Constitution realized that the structure of our government was delicate, but they also realized that changes might be needed over time. So they wanted to make changes possible, but they also made the amendment process complex so it could not be changed too easily. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned a lot.